So first we should do introductions, and I guess I can start. I'm Alyssa LaRose. I'm a land use planner at the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, and the town of Deerfield requested assistance to develop a housing production plan through the District Local Technical Assistance Program, which is funded through the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development. So that's why I'm here tonight. I've been working with the planning board on getting this project going. And so it's really great to have everyone here to start kind of moving forward with the project. You want to go ahead? Sure.
My name is MJ Adams. I'm with Franklin County Housing and Redevelopment Authority. I'm the Director of Community Development up there, and I've been working with Alyssa because I'm actually doing some research on elderly housing needs in Franklin County with a specific focus on Deerfield, Leverett, Whately, Conway, and Irving. And the idea is to see if we can find some location, some site to build some senior housing up here in Franklin County. And also to take a look at the broader range of elder housing needs up here in the region. I'll also say that another part of my job, unrelated to the elder housing study that we're working on, is I run the Community Development Block Grant Program, and the town of Deerfield is a participant in that right now, where we can provide housing rehab loans to property owners to make code, to fix up their houses, to bring them up to code. And that we do have funding available for Deerfield. We've had an outreach session, several outreach efforts. But if you know of anybody who needs some help fixing up their homes, please don't hesitate to have them give us a call. So,
Betty Turner, chairperson of the Deerfield Council on Aging, and active member of the senior center too. So I was told about this meeting and was on the original housing committee here in town for 10 years, and we'd like to get going again and see what we can do for affordable housing.
Good.
I'm Diana Damon. I've been the director of the South County Senior Center for 6 months now, and I'm here with the interest of senior housing and being able to be a conduit of information, at least to do that. If I have anything I can add, of course I will try to do so. Thank you.
Roger Susk. I'm sorry, I'm on the planning board. You're sorry you're on the planning board? Well, no, I was just like just daydreaming. Well, maybe I am sorry.
No. I'm Paul Ellis. I'm on the planning board.
Okay, great. So this meeting is just going to last until 7, so it'll be pretty quick because the planning board has other matters that they need to...
At this point in our meeting, we read the agenda.
Oh, okay.
If you want to follow that pattern.
Sure, I'm sorry.
No problem.
I've attended a lot of the more official meetings, but haven't actually run one. So.
Right.
Okay, so the agenda you should have in front of you. If anyone needs one, let me know. I have more printouts. So we just did the welcome and introductions. We will be reviewing the Deerfield Housing Production Plan purpose, outline, and process. I also passed out a handout that will have some of that information. Some of that will be a kind of review for some of you who have been working on this already. And then we'll review the housing needs assessment preliminary findings. I've been collecting a lot of data over the last few months, so I'll try to present some of that, and hopefully it won't be too overwhelming. It's a lot. And then we'll discuss a public workshop. So that's one of the main things that I'm hoping this group can really work on over the next month and a half or so, is trying to plan for a workshop that will engage the community in a discussion on housing. And so we can talk about some ideas on how to do that, and also look at dates and times and locations of where we might want to hold a workshop. and then we can set our next meeting date and any other business that comes up. Hi.
Hey, John.
Hey, guys.
We just got started.
What setup we have?
You're going to get in the middle, I think, John.
I was going to say, somebody gets in there and twirls around.
Hey, Jeff.
Here, I'll give you an agenda then.
Attendance sheet.
So is that good? Well, John should introduce himself.
Yep.
Introduce yourself.
I should, but I'm also curious if,
It's being taped and aired.
do we have to open a planning board meeting, but there's not...
I don't think we have to
Not
open a
until we have a
planning board
quorum.
meeting. I think this is a subcommittee meeting, and
Well, there was an issue about, and I think you talked to Peggy, if there's a bunch of us here, it needs to be a posted meeting.
It was posted as a planning board meeting. So as far as that goes, we're all set.
well, in other words, if we have to have a quorum, then we don't. So
Okay. I don't know if it's necessary to.
I don't think we do.
It's about the, how two of us aren't supposed to meet unless we
Yes.
post it, kind of that rule, which I...
Well, Alyssa kind of took the head of opening this meeting up and
Good.
and reading the agenda, and that's as far as we've gotten.
Good.
And okay, so John, how about you introduce yourself?
So I'm John Waite, chairperson of the Deerfield Planning Board.
And do you know
No.
everyone here? Betty
I
and.
haven't met yet. I'm Diana Damon. I'm the director at the South County Senior
Great.
Center
Excellent.
for
Thanks.
6 months now.
Excellent.
So yesterday, yeah.
Thanks.
I'm Betty Turner, and I'm chairperson of the Deerfield Council on Aging.
Excellent.
And I was a member of the original Housing Committee, Senior Housing Committee.
From a couple of years ago, which original one? There was
Well,
probably-
it was active for 10 years,
Yeah,
and
excellent.
then just dissipated.
All right, we got to do something about that.
So that old committee, or the prior committee that existed, focused specifically on senior housing,
Yep.
right? And this committee is a broader, looking at a broader range of affordable housing.
Hopefully, we'll get more action on it.
Yeah.
Alyssa's. Another one for John, maybe?
Yeah.
I got-
You got it? Okay, yep,
Okay.
he's all set.
Okay, so now we can just go into it.
And did
Well,
everybody sign in?
Yep.
The sign-in sheet?
I will, when it-
I would like to actually, because the agenda for the planning board is the meeting called to order at 6. So just in case.
Oh, okay.
Let me call to order the Deerfield Planning Board meeting for Monday, August 5th, 2013, about 6 o'clock here in the municipal offices. And our first item is the housing production plan. The planning board has 3 members here, which is not a quorum, so we can't take any votes or motions, but everything we talk about is still
Being recorded.
valued and recorded.
And I will take notes here, and there'll be notes
That makes me
taken.
feel better that I did that in case I was supposed to have done it. Casey wrote it down, so I was like, all right.
Yep, all right.
Okay,
Sorry,
so the handout that you have in front of you just has some basic information. The first section talks about affordable housing under Chapter 40B, which is a Massachusetts general law, and that's what defines affordable housing. And so that's what this plan is kind of mostly focusing on, but it can go beyond that some. But basically, this states that at least 10% of a town's housing units must be included on the subsidized housing inventory in order to be exempt from an unfriendly comprehensive permit, which is also known as a 40B development. And so when a town has less than 10% affordable housing, then a developer could potentially, I use the
See that? Secretly.
but may be able to, what's the best term for it?
Secretly.
Seek relief.
Flexibility.
Yeah, seek relief from local zoning when creating a certain amount of affordable housing in a new housing development. And so at this point, Deerfield has 1.5% affordable housing, so is therefore vulnerable to a comprehensive permit development. And when we talk about affordable housing, well, I guess we get to that a little bit further down. So the purpose of a housing production plan is that it can give communities that are below that 10% threshold some control over that process. So even if you're not at that 10% threshold, if you're making progress towards it, the state may, give you some relief from a 40B permit. And so a housing production plan identifies housing needs of a community and the strategies that the community will use to make progress in facilitating the development of affordable housing. And if a town has an approved housing production plan, the state will approve the plans, and meets certain production goals of new affordable housing, it can be certified in compliance with that plan for a period of 1 or 2 years. So that means you could be exempt from any 40B comprehensive permits. So right now, Deerfield's production goal for affordable housing is set at 11 units in order to get a 1-year kind of certification, or 22 units to get a 2-year certification. And that's based on your overall housing unit count in town as of the 2010 census. So it's a 0.5% is 11 units, and 1% of your total housing units is 22. That's how they figure that out.
So one more time, could you repeat that again?
Yeah, so the 11 units is
We need 11 units. Yep.
And that comes out to 0.5% of your total housing unit count right now in town, or
0.5%.
Yep. As of 2010, that's what they set it from. And
as of 2010?
Right. So the production goals are based on the 2010 census.
Okay.
And then they won't get changed again until 2020 census. So you have 10 years where you essentially have those same production goals, and it's 11 units within 1 year that would have to be created. Or if you do 22 units within 1 year, then you get an extra year of relief from 40B, from a negative.
What is the definition of 1 unit then? A unit equals?
A housing unit. So
A dwelling unit.
Okay.
So a duplex would be 2 units. If you had an 8 units apartment house, that would be 8 units.
Okay.
The units that are created that will provide you this relief, though, need to be affordable units, not just market rate units.
So 11 housing units then.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And the plan that we're working on creating is good for 5 years once it's approved by the state. And after 5 years, it needs to be updated and resubmitted for approval. And then the chart on the bottom of the page shows the HUD area median income limits for Franklin County as of fiscal year 2013. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about affordable housing, is housing that's affordable for a household making up to 80% of the area median income. And so if you look at the chart, it's by the size of the household, and household is defined as just the number of people living within 1 unit, so you don't necessarily have to be related. And that would be the household income is the 80% income limit for that size of household. Is everyone good
If I
so
understand
far?
this correctly, and part of this is for the notes and part of this is for me.
Yep.
We need to increase by 0.5%, which would bring us to 2% affordable housing. Is that what I'm reading here in the first year?
I suppose if you produce 11 units, which is 0.5%, then that would increase your total of affordable housing up to 2%.
Okay, that's what I was trying to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's good. I think I've written it that way here, and I just was.
Okay.
And the goal of the state is trying to encourage communities that are significantly below that 10% to make an effort. And if you're making a good faith effort, you're not going to get to 10% overnight. They know that. But the idea is to encourage the town to do some planning and to participate actively in the creation of the housing so that you're moving towards the 10%. And by doing that, you do get some relief from the 40B unfriendly permits.
And another kind of a procedural thing. Under this, are you going to give us our timeline again so that people know what the timeline is before we start
Sure.
going into further stuff? And
Yeah, I can say that.
I mean, don't. I'm not trying to stop you from doing what you're doing, but is part of this thing going to be the timeline?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I can go over that right now. So if you turn the page before I get into the actual outline of the plan, which this is a very detailed outline. The actual development of this plan needs to be complete by the end of December, because that's when the grant funding runs out that we're using. So it's a pretty quick time frame. So just keep that in mind. But then the actual, implementation and moving forward with the plan, that's going to be over the course of the next 5 years. And that's part of what we'll have to figure out through this process is how is that going to take place? How will we actually keep that momentum going?
So December is the deadline to complete which part again?
The actual plan, the development of the housing production plan. It needs to be submitted to the state for review.
For the next 5 years?
Right, so if they approve it, it will be good for 5 years before it would need to be updated.
Provided you're making real progress on the...
Right, that the plan will be approved, but you wouldn't be necessarily relieved from a 40B development unless you show
Until you've
that
completed the
Yeah, you're actually
10%
implementing.
over 5 years?
No,
Or 10 years?
As long as you're making progress towards those 11 units a year, real tangible units that are being created, then you're in the process of you're certified to be relieved from 40Bs.
Okay, so is 11 the magic number, or is 8 still?
11 a year is going to be your magic number.
Okay, good.
So if in the first year you do 22, then you've got a second year you can coast.
Okay.
But by the end of the third year, you will have
33 needed. Okay, gotcha.
And obviously the long-term goal is for Deerfield to be at 10% total affordable housing, or over 10%, so that then you won't even have to necessarily worry about, it would still be good to have a plan, and you want to continue to make sure that you remain above 10% and look at your housing needs in town. But that's the long-term goal, is to get to that point so that you don't even have to worry about that. So is that good?
That's good for me. I
Okay.
don't know if anybody else.
Well, there's one concern I have with this whole thing is we want to do a housing production plan and see what housing we have. And I think too many people focus on this 10% and the 11 houses and the 1.5%. And really, to me, it's about having a community where we have a diverse group of people. We have different housing. You get some McMansions and you get some affordable. And I think, I don't know how you can say that. It seems like we always get stuck on this 10%.
Well, yeah, so that part's kind of the main kind of impetus, I guess, is like the whole reason the state set this up was because of 40B. However, it's a really good exercise for a town to do anyways, and that's why I said, even though it's focused on affordable housing, we can kind of look at housing in general, especially with the public workshop. We want to get those affordable housing, the input that we need for affordable housing, but we can also expand that so that you're receiving input on housing in general.
Okay.
And that's both, to me, it's not just affordability, it's where, it's location.
Right, yes.
It's for who, what types of populations need it the most. And that, so it's bigger than just this law that the state happens
Right.
to have.
But I think what I was asking about this, and this is all good information we're given now, but are there any other benchmarks that we need to be aware of now? December is the end of the line, and that's when it stops. But are there time frames where we have to have meetings on a certain basis? And do we have a schedule of meetings going forward through December?
Well, that's part of what we can decide on tonight.
Okay, so that's
we
not...
originally had a kind of a proposed timeline.
We did at the planning board last month.
I know, that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, but
Just to find
we
out.
kind of changed things around a little, because traditionally how our office typically does plans where we'll have these working group meetings, and we often will review the sections of the plan as we go and things like that. And I think we kind of decided to try to change it around a little and have these meetings be more focused on that public engagement part of it.
Well, that's kind of what I was wondering.
Yeah.
And to that point, for instance, on the sign-in sheet, I don't see any email addresses. And if people here want to be part of that thing, which I think we were trying to do, then we probably should add them to the list and try to keep people informed as to when the meetings are. You know, if this group wants to be part of it, or if you don't have email, we can get it to you in other ways.
Well, I see you frequently. I can
Yeah.
make a copy. for
Right, so
Betty.
we've got Diana's email, and then
Yeah.
Okay.
she can get information to Betty, and then there were people here at the last two meetings, so we need to,
And I called
And I'll give it to the,
everyone on the sign-in sheet
chairperson
from
of
the
the
original
Okay.
stakeholder
Or
meeting that
Or
we
if they have an
had,
email.
Okay.
to let them know
She
about
does.
this meeting
Yeah.
too. So I don't mind calling people either.
We can make sure.
Okay.
to get it.
But yeah, so that's part
So
of what
as
we
of,
can
as
talk
of the
about.
start of this meeting, we have just one deadline, that's December, when the grant runs out, and we have to complete all our work by then. And tonight, we're going to set that agenda going forward. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay, good.
All right, so we can do a quick review of just the elements of the plan. And at this point, I just have this,
Got yours, right?
Yeah, okay.
have the handout in front of you available with a lot of findings. At the next meeting, whenever that we set that, I plan to have actual drafts of some of these sections for you to take home with you. So the plan will include an introduction that just goes over, the overview and purpose of the plan, and talk about some past planning efforts, which would include the Housing Committee efforts in the past.
I have a report on the survey that was done
That would be
10
great.
years ago. But
That would be great to have, yeah, because it's good to know what you've already done as a community. And then the second section is the comprehensive housing needs assessment. And that's where you're really getting into a lot of data, and this is useful in terms of affordable housing, but it's also useful just in terms of housing in general. So we're going to go over some of those findings tonight on demographics, housing characteristics. Next time, we can look more at the current and projected housing needs. So we're actually going to talk about that in just a few minutes. The third section is development conditions and constraints, opportunities and challenges. And so this is where we'll look at things like natural resources in town, areas that you might want to protect or that aren't really suitable for development because of wetlands or whatever the reasons are. Zoning regulations, looking at how those may support certain development in some areas, but maybe there needs to be some tweaking in other areas to get to the goals that you want. Infrastructure is obviously something that we need to know about and understand.
Can I ask a question on this thing? I assume now we're into the discussion of it. On the first page, you have the 80% income limit for one person. Now, let's say that we find a unit that is going to be affordable housing, and we have to demonstrate that it is. Is the rent what's listed here, or let's say you've got one person and their income is $18,000 a year, then is the rent for that apartment determined on that income, or is it determined on these incomes here?
Well,
How do you determine affordable housing? I mean, these are the guidelines here, but this is, for instance, these prices that are here are higher than any rent, in case some mortgages for properties here that people may own.
When you're looking at those income guidelines, the 80%, that's the upper limit of that income range. So a single-person household, the most that they would make would be $45,100, and then they'd be at 80% of the income. But the reality is that there's people at 55% of the regional income, they're at 30%, they're at 10%, and the goal is wherever they are in that spectrum, that they should be paying no more than 30% of their gross income towards housing costs, which include rent and utilities.
So I guess what I'm wondering is if I'm a landlord and I agree to this and I put it into my deed, a deed restriction, then do I get to stipulate how much rent that I'm willing to take, or do I have to take any and all comers at whatever rate they get? Because as you can tell, if you plan to rent something and you're making it affordable so that somebody pays, say, $700 a month rent, and then somebody comes in with a much, much lower income than that, and it comes down to $300 or $400, then what does the landlord do at that point if they can't afford to rent it at that?
Well, the landlord would actually, if there's an affordable housing deed rider on a rental unit, then the landlord has said, I agree not to charge any more than the fair market rent for this house or for this apartment. And that is actually based on a calculation that HUD does by the size of the unit. And they'll say, a 3-bedroom in Deerfield should not, the fair market rent for that is $900 a month.
Okay.
Then there's a utility allowance that HUD makes some calculations about, depending on the characteristics of what they use for cooking, electric, heating, what the landlord can actually charge for the rent, the actual.
So then I guess my first question would be.
Can I finish it?
Okay. I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
Working you through this
So
process.
say that the rent that ends up being charged by the landlord is $750, that they're allowed to charge $750 for that unit, but the person who comes in can only afford, $500. Then that person can't afford that unit, even though that unit is affordable. It's not affordable that particular person. But if that person has a rental subsidy from the housing authority, then the housing authority can help that person rent that unit, and the landlord would get the full $750 for them.
Okay.
So there's that subsidy that has to come into play sometimes for lower income people. But quite honestly, there are sometimes people who can afford those rents without the subsidy, and that's really what we're trying to target, to make sure that those units are available in the housing stock. And so, yes, some people will need a subsidy regardless, just because they have such little income. But if they don't have a subsidy and they wanted to rent that unit, then it would be a negotiation if the landlord was willing to take less, or the person could choose to pay more if there was no subsidy there. But that's the private market at work.
Okay, so I guess then that piece is missing from what we have here. If we're trying to recruit landlords to this program, then we should define how that number is reached so that they know what it is. In other words, they can say, okay, my apartment is 800 square feet, and here is what HUD says that should be, and am I willing to meet that requirement? But without that information here, I don't see how a landlord can make an informed decision.
Right, and we can certainly.
Yeah, so that's just something on the to-do list is to get that formula so that people can understand it.
Absolutely, no, I think you're right.
That's all I'm asking. That's good.
Because it gives you a sense of the rent levels that people that are considered affordable.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so we were on development conditions and constraints. That's all information I hope to have for you at the next meeting. It's a lot of that we already have at our office, so it will just be putting it together and probably some mapping. The next section is housing goals. This is something that we may begin to talk about before the public workshop, but one of the main points of having the public workshop is to try to gather information from the community to help develop housing goals. So we may end up doing a little bit of this before, but a lot of this after the workshop. Implementation strategies, again, this gets into some of that nitty-gritty.
I'm sorry to interrupt you,
okay.
but on the housing goals thing, I think we talked at our last meeting of the planning board about the possibility of targeting commercial, Central Village, right? John, didn't we talk about that?
Well, to me, that gets back to that's where the utilities are, that's where the water is, so this all kind of goes together.
Yeah. So we were kind of thinking, is it legitimate to say the Central Village is our target area, or do we need to target the whole town?
Well, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
I think that's an area that I think will be looked at,
Okay.
but that's going to be further down the road.
That's part of the mapping she talked about.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and this is some of these goals that are listed, and also the implementation strategies. Some of these, the wording comes straight from requirements from the state that has to be in here, and then some of it added in based on kind of our discussions. So the last section is implementation strategies, and this gets down to more of the nitty-gritty on how Deerfield is going to move forward with trying to implement the plan and the goals. So there's a lot of information here, so if you want to, feel free to contact me at any time after the meeting to talk more about it. It will take a long time to go through it all right here. So any questions after that? Pretty good? Okay. So I just wanted to quickly try to get through some findings. There's a lot of bullet points over the next few pages here on some of the findings from all the data gathering that I've been doing. So I'm going to try to touch on some of these. If there's any questions, let me know. But it's kind of a lot. So the first section is probably a review for some of you. But in terms of demographics, the first table shows population growth since 1970. Deerfield has grown about 32% from 1970 to 2010 in terms of population. That's actually, yes. So that's actually, it's higher than some of your surrounding communities, but also lower. Sunderland grew quite a bit over that time, and that's probably due to UMass. And then Conway also grew quite a bit. And one thing to point out is that Deerfield's one of the only towns that actually grew in the last 10 years. There's a lot of towns that lost population over the between 2000 and 2010, whereas Deerfield actually grew by about 8%. It's projected that Deerfield will continue to grow about at that rate, and so by 2035 you could have about 400 new residents, which would be an 8% increase, and that would result in approximately 174 new households living in the town. So those households would need housing units in order to live here. So that's something we might come back to with the workshop, because it just provides a framework for looking ahead. Deerfield's population is slightly older in terms of age than the county and the state, and the number of residents over the age of 65 is expected to comprise almost a quarter of the total population within the next 20 years, compared to 15% currently. So currently 15% of your population is 65 and over, and that's going to grow quite a bit.
And it did grow, if I can interject, from the 2000 census to the 2010 by 40%. In that range, it was 41 or 42 in that age range.
And then a large portion of Deerfield households, 40%, are families with no children living at home. And also Deerfield has a lower percentage of households with children than the county. However, that percentage, which is 28%, is actually higher than some of the surrounding communities. Deerfield residents typically earn more in terms of income compared to Franklin County. The median household income in 2011 was $69,744 for Deerfield. And also in 2011, the average annual wage for a Deerfield worker, someone who's in the labor force, was $45,938, which is higher than the county average of $35,979, but lower than the state average, which is up closer to $60,000. So you can see this is a lot of numbers. Also, Deerfield's one of the county's major employment centers. You have a lot of jobs here in town. And in terms of your workforce, so people who live in town and who are in the labor force, about 40% are employed within either manufacturing or educational services, which isn't surprising because you have a lot of manufacturing and education type jobs in the community. But that doesn't mean that they all work within Deerfield, but still it's an indication. And actually about 39% of Deerfield residents who are in the labor force work in town, which is a pretty high percent compared to a lot of other communities. So you have a lot of people living here and working here. So on to some housing characteristics. So this is looking at housing units and the structures and everything in town. So between 1990 and 2010, there's been an increase of 98 housing units, which is about a 5% increase. There was actually a decrease from 1990 to 2000 by 13 units, and that's consistent with the fact that the population in town also decreased at that time. overall, Deerfield's increase in housing units is pretty small compared to the county and a lot of the surrounding towns over that time period. Conway's grew by 35%, Sunderland 15%, Whately almost 25% in terms of new housing units. Roughly 75% of occupied units in town are owner occupied, and about 25% are renter occupied. Since 1990, rental units have decreased by 82 units, while ownership units have increased by 140 units. So it represents a 14% decrease in rental stock over the last 20 years.
Is that, some things I like it when you compare things to the state or some other thing.
Yeah.
Like, is that 75% owner occupied? Is that normal?
That's higher than the county. I think the county's around 6. Well, I might be getting it wrong. I did have, it's in the actual write-up. I just was trying to keep this short.
It's not wildly off from normal or something.
The normal home ownership rate around the country is about 66, 67%.
Yeah, and I can, I definitely have that comparison in the text of the plan, so I'll bring that with me next time. A healthy housing market is generally considered to have vacancy rates between 2 to 3% for owner-occupied homes and 4 to 5% for rental properties. So that allows people to, move and find new housing. Deerfield's homeowner vacancy is 1.2, which is kind of on the low side, and the rental vacancy is 5.1, which is pretty much in that healthy range. Overall, there's kind of a consensus that the vacancy rates are low at this point in the county, so that shows that there may be some demand for housing. And there have been 88 building permits issued for new housing units in Deerfield between 2000 and 2012, and all of these were for single-family homes. And I'm sorry, the bullet above talks about how the majority of housing in Deerfield is single-family. It's 81%, with 10% are 2-unit structures, 4% are 3 or 4 unit structures, and 5% are 5 or more units. And so with the building permit data here, it just shows that trend, if things don't change, that trend will continue more towards single-family homes and less multi-family units. Also, about 36% of the town's current housing units were built in 1939 or earlier. That's not uncommon. That's pretty consistent throughout the county, older housing stock. And since then, the decades that saw the most construction of new housing were the 70s, when about 19% of Deerfield's current housing stock was built, and the 80s, when 17% of the current housing units were built. And then this gets into some of that income data again. So roughly 37% of Deerfield households make incomes below that 80% threshold, the HUD area median income, that would qualify you for an affordable housing unit. And roughly 65% of senior householders in Deerfield make incomes below 80% of the area median income. So it's on the senior side of things, it's a much higher percentage. And that table just gives a little breakdown showing the approximate percent of current Deerfield households who fall below those thresholds. So if you see 120%, which is obviously over the median income, it's about 58%. If you go down to 50%, which is below that 80% threshold, it's approximately 20% of households. So like what you were saying before, if someone comes in and can't afford that 80%, that's what we're talking about here. It's people who are lower than that. And it's hard to get more specific than that because, again, it's broken down by the household size, and we just don't have that level of detail, so these are estimates. And then looking at home sales in town, I looked at sales from March 21st, 2012, that's a typo, and August 1st, 2013. So it's a period of over a year. And there are a total of 48 single-family home sales, so this is single-family, in Deerfield, and the median sale price was $250,000. So this is when I try to compare kind of income and wages to actual prices in town. So I have another handout, which, again, this gets really tricky when you get into the details of trying to estimate, what income you would need for housing units, because you have to look at a lot of different factors. But I actually used Northampton. They have a housing partnership, I believe, are the ones who did an exercise very similar to this, to try to just illustrate to residents some of the affordability gaps that they were seeing in town. And so I tried to do it for Deerfield. Hi, Caroline.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'm sorry I couldn't come earlier, and I have to leave. I have an EMS meeting, but
That's okay.
I just absolutely want you to know that we're absolutely committed to senior housing if there's any chance.
Well, yeah, that's definitely going to be a component of what we're talking about, for sure.
And we're working with the housing authority, sort of already.
Yeah.
We just haven't been very successful today.
No, that's
And you know.
So does this, and if you look on the back, it tells you how I came to some of these estimates in terms of, the cost, the monthly costs for a median single-family home in Deerfield. And then the 25th percentile single-family home price was $200,000. And so that means that below that, there's 25% of the homes for sale were below that price. But even that was, requiring an income that was, over $58,000. And then on the far right-hand side are those HUD income limits.
Excuse me just a minute.
Yes.
Are you for the affordable housing or for the stuff that the planning board's doing?
No, we're here for the 55 and over, 2 apartments.
Okay, that's for
So you're for the
CBA.
affordable housing? Zoning board. Come on up and sit down.
No,
Whoa,
they're
no,
for
no.
later.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We got 10 minutes left.
Oh,
Yeah, they'll
okay.
wait. I think the zoning board's doing something later.
Oh, okay.
Worry about new people.
So I'm still digesting this, actually, but are there any questions about it or anything you notice that you think is interesting?
Right now, I'm overwhelmed by it myself, so I don't know what to ask you.
That's okay.
Well, and I would suggest this is really important stuff that we do take some time and digest it and get more people involved. We've
Yeah.
got 10 minutes left, so I'd really like to start getting into what the next steps are.
Thank you, John. Yeah. So this is all information to take home and get back to me on any questions, comments.
What's the best way to do that, in person on the phone, or what?
Either way, my phone or my email.
Okay.
Do you want me to tell you it's for the...
Can I just, don't we have, you don't get emails with her on it?
I don't know if I do or not, but I'm sure I can get your email afterwards, but I'm just saying, if anybody else in this group that doesn't have it wants it,
Yeah, and I have cards with me, so I can
that would be
pass
great.
out my
That would be
card to
perfect.
everyone.
That would short circuit.
So I'll make sure to...
Just a quick thing before we leave this thing. So there were 88 building permits issued. Do you actually have how many houses were built? Who has that information?
No,
Our building inspector.
Yeah,
should.
so I did contact the town about getting the actual information on, well, I also want to know the addresses so that we can map where
Right.
new homes are being built, because that could be really informative. And so that's a request that they're still working on.
Because I've been on the planning board for at least half of this 12-year period here, you guys longer, but there haven't been 88 houses
No, I was
built
gonna say, that's right.
in Deerfield in the last 12
All
years.
right, well, I can check into that
So,
more, and I can compare it to the
probably been like 8.
census.
Well, the other thing too is there would be a building permit if somebody added over a certain size on their building. you know what I mean, in their house.
This says for new housing units.
Yeah, I would just.
Oh, it is?
Well,
It's
they
just new
count
housing
specific-
units?
Yeah.
It'd be an interesting investigation, because to me, that's part of the issue here, is that there has been very little additional housing of any type in the town, and then we see our population growing, and it's like, okay, that's out of whack.
I know, I was at the same question. How did we gain so
Yeah.
many families or units in the town when we didn't increase the rentals or the available inventory of housing units didn't go up enough to meet the extra growth? So how did that happen?
Right.
That was my question back a ways here.
Okay. I'll look at that more
And
closely.
40% of the families don't have children, so it's like, yeah, it's like out of whack. It's not like more kids are just being created and living in these houses, but maybe there are. I don't know. But these numbers are great. This is what's really going to help us as we get forward.
All right.
And
so-
I just have one question. I'll try to keep it as short as I can. How I mean, can you go? If we put out the criteria for this, are people that are already affordable housing now just come in and apply to do this, or is there some other process that needs to go through to do it?
No, they could not come and petition to have their unit applied at, or to be counted as an affordable housing unit. There's a fairly involved process, and it requires a deed rider, a 15-year deed rider on the property. But
Okay, so then to me that sounds like money and lawyers and all that to do that. Does that sound right?
Meaning that there's two things that are happening. If there's units that you want to be on the subsidized housing inventory, the state's subsidized housing inventory, then there's a process that they have to go through to be listed on there, and there has to be some long-term provision that they will stay affordable for a longer term. And then there's just the general supply of housing units that are affordable to the people who live here, and you want to encourage that as much as possible. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be government subsidy to help make that happen. Some of the affordable units will be provided by the private market.
So in other words, you're saying that if there's a housing that's already affordable, that won't count, that's just there?
It's just there.
Okay.
It might be serving the need, but it's not counted on the subsidized housing inventory.
Ooh, okay. Wow.
Okay, so the next steps is to, I guess we should try to set a date for another meeting, because in that meeting, I can kind of bring some follow-up to some of the questions we've had and a little more information, but we really will have to prioritize working on the planning for a workshop. So, John, can we set meetings out that aren't in line with the regular planning board meeting?
I think we should.
Yeah, because it
yes.
would be good to meet before the next planning board meeting.
Do you want to set a regular meeting date, like 5 regular meeting dates, or do you want to just make them random?
Well, we should at least, it wouldn't be bad to maybe set the next 2. I mean, it would be good to have an idea of when we want to do the workshop. Was one thing I wanted to try to do tonight, but we could hold off on that until the next time we meet.
What I'm getting at is, let's say you put the 4th Monday of the month as the meeting night, then that would be before our meeting on the 1st.
But I think we need to meet more frequently than that, at least
Okay.
over the
All
course
right.
of the next month and a half.
How
Only
frequent?
got till the end of December.
Right, so
How
I'm
frequent would you want them?
saying maybe in, so let's see, we are August 5th. So even the week of August 19th, or the last week of August, one of those weeks, if we could set a date to meet again.
Okay, we may have a problem with the last Monday of the month, because at our planning board today, we're going to have to schedule a September meeting for conflicts. So I'm going to recommend that the 29th of August be our meeting, but that may not happen.
And it doesn't have, I'm not necessarily wedded to a Monday either. It's more a group decision on, I don't know what days are better for people. I'm guessing evenings are better still. This time is good.
Yeah.
So 6 o'clock.
I mean, there's a reason we need more people.
Yes.
And so we've had like 3 meetings, and we've had different people at each one, and
Yeah.
I'd love to have one meeting where everybody comes, but that might not happen. But
And I think having, CPC members, ZBA, we had talked about some of these other groups to try to get them involved. So if there's a day that conflicts with their schedules.
Well, as far as planning board members, I think most of us have Monday nights available. And I don't know how many planning board members are going to be at these meetings, but I think I'll try to be there.
yeah, I mean, if we consistently get 2 or 3, that'd be good, I think.
So if we tried for Monday nights to start with, and I'm also thinking that at some point, it might be good to schedule a meeting at the senior center during the day if possible.
I was going to mention that MJ and I are planning on going to the senior center in September. And I believe right now the date's September 18th, if that works for you.
What day
We
of
were
the
going to
week
talk
is
with
that?
Diana about that.
It's a Wednesday.
Wednesday? And what time Wednesday?
11? Is that
11 in
right?
the
I
morning?
didn't bring it with me. I should
I think
have.
it's
I
11
grabbed
to
a lot of
12.
our things.
Okay, so it's morning, it's late morning, noontime, something.
Yeah, and the idea was also for this group to talk about that, to see, exactly what we want to discuss with the folks at the senior
Yeah,
center.
and to get there.
Yeah.
Well, I think going back to my question I had just a little earlier, we need to come up with some kind of a game plan. So if somebody says, I think my house is affordable, what could I do to make it count in there? We need to be able to come up with those answers. I mean, if it's not possible, we need to be sure and tell people that if your house is affordable now, you can't go in and do anything to it. Or, yes, you're capable of making your house fit this affordable housing by doing this, this, and this. Because I got the feeling a little bit from you, ma'am, that if you were affordable housing, thank you very much, but you're not eligible to work towards a deed restriction on it. And
You're welcome to. It's just that the deed writer usually comes with a set of guidelines that the state has, and I'm more than happy to share that with you.
oh no, not just me.
But
This is a
with anyone who
group
might have
thing.
some interest in that, they
Well,
might
that's
have
why
a-
I'm saying in the senior housing here, this might be advantageous to them because if I understand it correctly, they can live in a house, own it, and have a mortgage that's affordable and agree to the guidelines and get a tax break in the consequence of it, and be able to live in their home where they may not be able to afford it in any other way.
Are you suggesting that somebody who now is a owner-occupant of their home and they can't
Yeah,
afford it?
a senior living at home.
There might be a way to transition that to be an affordable unit.
Well, that's what I'd like to take to the senior center if that's the time that you're going to do it, because that gives people the means to do it. That's all I'm saying. If we can,
And I
look
just
with it.
want to be abundantly clear that it's not that simple of a process. If it's part of a larger development, it's easier to get those units onto the subsidized housing inventory. We're talking about scattered site, currently owned, owner-occupied homes by families whose income says that they should be, that the housing that they're living in is affordable or should be affordable. To transition that so that unit is counted in the subsidized housing inventory is not an easy process.
If it was an easy process, we wouldn't even have to meet, right?
Right.
That's my point. So, I mean, we can't, if we prejudge this as a failure, we will fail. If we judge to succeed, we will succeed.
I think your point is well taken, that how do we find the path so that we can have the affordable homes be counted in the subsidized
There you
housing
go.
inventory?
Exactly.
Yeah, and that will be part of, hopefully, our strategies.
And as Carolyn came in and said, she's very anxious to make the senior housing kind of a focus here on it, and I think we thought that as a board too.
Right, and so that's great that you guys are meeting, so that's almost like a subsector of this larger housing production.
It is, yeah.
So,
yeah.
So they do that. So we get back to, in 2 weeks, are you going to have more of this filled in and fleshed out? And
Yes,
we get
so that's what I'm
into-
saying. I would like to
So
kind
that
of
would be
move
the
forward, 'cause I know that we
19th of
keep kind of
August.
going over some of the same stuff. So, in 2 weeks is enough time for me to really get more done and to focus on the workshop.
You're going to be able to do that with all the planning you've got to do.
Well, this is a priority for me.
So do we want to set August the 19th? Is that what I'm hearing, or something around that date?
Or the following, because the other question is to get more people, and,
Yep.
you know, there was a lot of vacations, I didn't do anything to get people here, I think we didn't do enough, so I think we also need to make a concentrated effort to get a few more voices here.
Well, so-
Like, I didn't know about this until last Thursday, and I didn't hear about the final time for the meeting or date until tonight. So
So if we said more like the 26th, that gives us 3 weeks, you'd have, flesh this out,
Yeah.
get some more people,
That's fine.
hopefully would come.
And what's that date?
That's a Monday.
Monday, the
It's the last
26th.
Monday of August. It wasn't the time you were recommending.
No, I know, I don't know why that, maybe I was misinformed here.
Or we could, again, set it at 6 o'clock in case the planning board does need to have a meeting that night as
See,
well.
we have our meeting on the 2nd of September, but that's Labor Day.
Right.
And then the next meeting, next week is the special election, so we either have to change the day of our meeting, or go back a week, I would think.
So would 6 PM on the 26th work, regardless of if you have to have?
Would work for me,
Yeah, that way, even if the planning board does have a meeting.
That's right, even if we
Okay.
do, we still can do it for an hour.
Okay, and let me get out
Okay,
my
August 26th.
cards. Dingy.
I've got another person that would be
Oh, I have everyone else's card
interested
in here.
in your card, too.
Great, yes, yeah, pass
I would ask
around my
that,
information to anyone else you think would like to come.
I would ask that if we send, like, names or to you, Alyssa, and you do you might have to do the runaround and follow the calls and stuff, because we aren't good at that.
Yeah, that would be fine with me. I just need to know who I should be contacting.
Call a few people, too.
Sure, that would be great. So that's,
You know, we talked about someone from the
Well, you know,
assessors
like
would be
you-
helpful too. They know the lay of the land.
so do you want this?
Hello.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and John, you have
Start the
like,
next one. I know where to reach you.
Roger, do you want this or?
Sure, I'll take it.
Okay,
Thanks.
yeah, so phone or email is fine to get in touch with me.
And then we're still looking at a public kind of meeting in,
I'm thinking that we'll have to push it to October.
that might be early, we had September, let's say early October.
Yeah, I'm thinking early October.
All right.
So leave us, so we would have the meeting on the 26th, probably another meeting
September,
in September, at least one.
yeah.
Well, are you setting for the 18th now, or is that just a,
No, 26, 6 PM.
On the-
That would be our
August
next,
26th, and then there's September 18th, where we're meeting at
Right.
the Senior Center.
okay, okay. I'll
which
put
is
that
kind
down.
of,
And then the community workshop would be early October.
yeah,
Because you said we want to do some stuff before that, but then we need that information to do more stuff.
right, yeah, so we
That's a
can't
good-
push that back too late.
So it's still a good time.
Would you like this? This was,
Sure, and I'll bring it with me next time.
that was done when,
This is great, 2003. Thank you. I'll bring it with me next time.
okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.